morning talking about very detailed case studies about immigrant health and, quite frankly, the really messed up state of our American healthcare system. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about and back up a little bit to talk about how some of these immigrants that y'all have been learning about actually got here. What the U.S. policies are about refugees and other forced migrants, and then switch gears again and have Dr. Barra talk about his forced migration story from Afghanistan 3 years ago, and get his unique perspectives as both a medical professional and a former refugee, so that it can hopefully inform you all as you are becoming clinicians and are going into your rotations of what's going on in the heads of some of the patients you might be seeing. But first, I've got to empathize with you because medical school is hard, right? Can I see a show of hands? Is medical school the hardest school y'all have ever been to? Like, oh yeah, thank you for the honesty. Yes, yes. And first of all, I gotta say, I don't know this myself personally. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I did go to Johns Hopkins undergrad, so I know quite a few people. Thank you, go Blue Jays. But we were too nerdy to be that school spirited. So, but you know, but I know enough that it's hard, right? And let me get a show of hands again. Like, how many of you have ever felt overwhelmed going to school? Yeah, gosh, such an honest crowd. Thank you, thank you. See, because when I feel overwhelmed, sometimes I just want to go home. And I don't know about y'all, maybe you guys want to go home and sit around the dining room table and talk to your loved ones about your hard day. When I feel overwhelmed and want to go home, I just want to flop down on my couch and pull a fuzzy blanket around me. But what if you could go home? What if you had to leave your home forever and never see that dining room table or that couch ever again? I don't have to imagine this because this is my family's story. You see, in April 1975, my father was a colonel in the South Vietnamese Army, and it was the waning days of the war, and the communists were going to take over, and staying for him meant death. And we had some American friends because he was a communications, really intelligence officer, and they came and said, hey, we can take your wife and kids with us. We're leaving in 2 hours. Are you guys staying? We're going. Now, that is a dramatic story, right? But it has played out over and over and over in this country. And I want to do, and obviously we came, right? We went on a C-130 aircraft carrier. We were refugees. We were in a refugee camp for a month, and we eventually settled in Houston, Texas, where I grew up. And I'd like to do a little exercise with you all. And this exercise, we usually do it in 15-20 minutes, but we're just going to do it real fast. Let's say you were put on the same situation as my family. Let's say that you had only hours to escape this country to Dulles Airport. And by the way, this is not foreshadowing. This sounds a little weird, but like we did this simulation way before everything went left here. But you know, you can either take your phone out, use your notes app, or your computer, or just think about it in your head. If you had only a couple hours, oh, and the other thing is, let's say we're here in Washington, not in your home state. So you're not with your parents or in your home. What first thing is, you would take with you. And we're going to take a couple minutes so you can think about this. The first question is, who are the 3 people you would take with you? And the second thing is, you know, space is dear on an airplane. What are the 4 things that you would take with you? So I'm gonna give you a minute to think about this. 3 people, 4 essential things that y'all would take to leave this country forever. And let's see. Okay, that's all right. We're not. This is just like something in y'all's heads. So we're not gonna put y'all on the spot and ask you who you would bring and who would you leave behind. The first thing is, can you raise your hands like if a passport? And we're gonna do the honor system here. I know y'all are students, no cheating. Can you raise your hands if you thought passport? Oh, pretty good. Now, everybody else who did not think passport, your journey ends right now. And it might end for days, weeks, months, or years. And that's okay because other people have forgotten their passports too. And then you get to Dallas Airport and it's chaos and the people movers aren't even going. And you get to the plane and it turns out there's only 3 spots. Who do you leave behind? Do you leave yourself behind? If you could bring your family, do you leave your dad behind or your grandpa? This is the plight. These are real scenarios that happen to real people all over the world. And I don't mean to say this to depress you, but just to impart on you some of the things that the patients that you see, the immigrant and refugee patients that you see, might have gone through to get all the way here to the DMV, all the way to the clinic that you might be at right now with Dr. Joe here. So let's switch gears and actually just think about that for a second. Think about how this feels to you right now, how uncomfortable it feels to think about who you would leave behind and what kind of things that you need to bring and leave behind. And think about the unspoken things that these refugee patients might be holding with them as you see them in your rotations. So this afternoon, I'm going to give you an overview about the policy side of what it means to be a forced migrant, a refugee, an asylum seeker, an SIV, because my specific expertise is refugee policy, how Homes Not Borders helps, and how you might be able to help beyond becoming doctors. And I just want to see a show of hands again, because unless we're Native Americans, everybody in this room has an immigration story, whether it was from last year or 400 years ago. Raise your hands if you know how your family got here to the United States, either forced migration, being brought here, or through immigration. That's great. And the folks who didn't raise your hands, you should call your parents tonight and ask them. And if you don't know, I guess you can ask ChatGPT, but again, don't ever put your PII in an AI chatbot. Let's start at the beginning with some definitions. A forced migrant is a person who's been forced to leave their home due to conflict, natural disaster, persecution, or other emergencies. It's not a legal term, it's a term that people in my field use as an umbrella for so many other different categories of forced migrant immigrants. I'm not going to go through all of them today. You don't really need to know all of them today, but I'll go through 3 of them because they're the most, they're the ones who are most confused and also the ones that you might see in your clinical rotations. So first, let's talk about refugees specifically. The UN has parameters on what a refugee persecution based on race, religion, ethnic background, nationality, membership in a particular social group. Many times it's being LGBTQ, political opinion, and is unable or unwilling to return to their home due to such fear. And an important thing to know about refugees is that they start their journey outside the US, usually in a third country, in a refugee camp, something of that nature. And refugees, all refugees that come to the United States go through a 9-step vetting process. They are very thoroughly vetted, both for their views and for certain health conditions that would bar them from coming to the United States. So these people start outside the United States, go through this very thorough vetting process, and then they are admitted to the United States thereafter. And I want to emphasize that refugees are completely legally here. An asylum seeker is a forced migrant that is not classified as a refugee. And the major difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker is where they seek their entry into the United States. So refugees start their process outside of the US, get vetted outside of the US, and then come here. Asylum seekers come here on their own steam at a US port of call. That could be by ship, at an airport, or at the southern border. They come here for very similar reasons as refugees, but the vetting process starts when they come here and then register. And then both groups, they have a well-founded fear and are seeking asylum here in the United States. Asylum seekers also go through a different legal process. I mean, quite frankly, it's changing very rapidly as we speak, and it's going through the legal system, so I'm not going to go through it. And as you can see from the lovely National Guard people outside wandering around, and maybe some of the ICE people, our policies towards both people who are have papers and are legally here and who are going through the asylum process has rapidly changed since January of this year. And there's another category of forced migrants that you all should know about because you'll probably run across them in your rotations. They're called Special Immigrant Visa Holders, or SIVs. Now, these people come to the United States because they worked on behalf of the United States government, a United States contractor, or an NGO. In all practical terms, and have done so between 2003 until 2023. It mostly is people of Iraqi origin or from Afghanistan. In all practical terms, SIVs are all Afghans now. And why do you need to know this? And that is because on January 20th, 2025, the first day President Trump was in office, he signed an executive order halting the U.S. refugee resettlement system, which has been in place since 1980. That means that no refugees are allowed to come to the United States, and no refugees have come to the United States except for about 90 white Afrikaners that he signed an executive order declaring as refugees, although they are not considered refugees by the UNHCR. So, but there's a loophole in that because there are people here in the United States, most notably U.S. military service members who have worked side by side with Afghan allies who said, no, this is not right. We are not going to leave our allies behind in Afghanistan to be persecuted or die. So there is this one loophole right now that the only category of refugees that can enter the United States are SIVs. I think there are many of them who are come to the newcomers clinic in Alexandria. So needless to say, the fate of newcomers is very uncertain, not only because of ICE raids or people who do not have their papers here. Refugees cannot get their green cards until they've been here for a year. SIVs come here and they get their green cards immediately, and you're like, why does that matter? And it connects back to the case studies that you guys were learning this morning, because of recent legislation, food benefits, SNAP, ends this November. 2 weeks from now, for refugee populations or any immigrant populations who do not have their green card. And starting on October 1st, 2026, Medicaid ends for them too. This is a problem because it is overwhelming, and I'm not going to talk about the technical stuff. Y'all probably heard about it this morning. I'm going to talk about it from a personal level. This is a problem because it is overwhelming to come to this country and start anew. I mean, this is part of my family lore for as long as I can remember. It's so hard to come here, work hard, and build a new life without any support from the government, at least initially. I mean, my family, we were on welfare and Medicaid when we were here, and the government did many things for us. They retrained my father. He became a vending machine repairman because in Houston, Texas, you don't really need a South Vietnamese intelligence officer. So, there's so many benefits that come from helping people get their start in the United States. And giving them time to adjust and chasing the American dream, like the rest of us. Today, I work at Homes Not Borders, whose mission is to provide the refugee and forced migrant population of the DMV with what they need to thrive and feel at home. We run a variety of programs to help newcomers, and I know in your abundant free time later, you are welcome to come volunteer with us or donate. We have QR codes right here. And I know there's a lot to take in, but I want to switch gears again and turn the podium over to Dr. Habib Barra, who will tell us his personal story of escape from Afghanistan and give you his thoughts, his unique thoughts as both a doctor and a patient, as a newcomer and a clinician, and tell you some cultural differences that Afghans might bring to a health visit. And after Dr. Barra's remarks, we will take questions after this.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here in front of brilliant minds, future doctors, physicians, surgeons, and healers. Let me share my story with you, and thank you for listening. At midnight in October 6, 2021, I faced a difficult situation. I had to decide whether to leave our country with my wife and kids,
You're so tall, Dr. Barra.
sorry, this is okay. At midnight, October 6, 2021, I faced a difficult situation. I had to decide whether to leave my country, my kids, and wife, or not. My mind was racing. My thoughts were coming fast. I had the bad experience of immigrating to Pakistan when I was 5 years old. I still remember the hardship of that journey, being thirsty and hungry for days, and the feeling of stranger for years. During the Russian attack in Afghanistan, I was 4 years old, and a wedding party was taking place in our neighborhood. On that day, for a few minutes, I and my friends went outside to play, and suddenly bombs and rockets started raining down from somewhere, causing destruction all around us. When I arrived at the scene of the wedding, I was shocked to find that many people, including the bride and groom, had died on the spot. My pregnant mother was injured and bleeding from her head. She delivered a premature baby later and suffered from severe headaches for many years. We moved to another district, a very remote area where my parental aunts were living. I was silent for several weeks. I had nightmares, screaming in my sleep, do not eat, always hacked my mother, and constantly cried. One day, a group of Bedouin women arrived in my aunt's village to provide traditional treatments. They were treating with fire, cats, and needling. My aunt had been experiencing chronic pain in her leg and lower back, which had been affecting her ability to work and walk normally. To help relieve her pain, an incision was made on her small toe, and the toe was bound with salt and ashes of cotton. My aunt instantly felt pain-free and was able to walk normally again. She was overjoyed and brought me to that woman, telling them I had not spoken a word for several weeks. They opened my mouth by force and put some warm, melted medicine in a hot metal spoon that burned my tongue, and said the story is here. Before August 2021, as a family, we were so happy about our achievements that year. I was promoted in my job, we bought a house, my wife got a project for women's health, and our kids were enrolled in school. I was enjoying the good time with my siblings, mother, and relatives. That very night, I found myself alone with memories and tense discussions with my wife, who said, "Don't overthink, Habib. Let's see." I asked her, how can I leave my mother who is ill and needs me now? My home, my new business, my country, my business, my friends, everything. My wife said, I'm also leaving my work, school, and students, who are as dear as my own children. What will happen if we are tortured in prison for all the works and jobs we did? Do you remember the warning calls I received when I arranged the girls' cycleways? What about you, me, and our kids? Look at them. Decide for them. Maybe this is the last chance we have. So we looked at the kids and left our home in the darkness without even calling anyone to say goodbye. We started an unknown and uncertain journey. In the car, my daughter was in my arms, hugging me. She touched my face with her tiny hands and suddenly remembered her doll and said, Daddy, Daddy, did you take my baby doll? I thought a little. I'm sorry, dear, I forgot. But I will buy a new one for you. She said, no, I want mine. Oh, what will happen to my baby doll? Who will take care of her? She will not have a mother to sleep with her? She started crying, and I tried to calm her down. We are going to a new place, a new home. We will have new friends, and go to a new school. With her kind voice, she asked me, "Where are you going?" "Will there be no war?" I said, "Oh yeah, at least no war." A few miles ahead, suddenly our car was stopped by a strange-looking gunman. He came close to the car, looked inside the car, and when he noticed women were inside, he turned his face to the driver and asked him, "Where are you going?" "We came from Kabul and are going to Mazar," the driver replied. The gunman's eye narrowed, focusing on the vacant front seat, and asked, "Why no passenger is there?" We were shocked and looked at each other with racing hearts. What would happen next? Finally, our driver said, "My brother is also going to Mazar, and I'm picking him from Mazar, a province ahead." The tension lifted as the gunman nodded in understanding. "All right, we'll safe travels," he said, stepping back. Oh, people had been great. Thank God, and we're so grateful for our driver's response. After several hours, we arrived at an airport. We were confused, and no one knew where we were going. I called my siblings and mother to say goodbye, and that we were leaving Afghanistan now. I can still hear my mother's sad and kind voice saying that I hope to see you again in my life. Then we were in the airplane. It was a civilian Afghan plane. I looked around, it was full, and all the seats were taken. I saw many passengers calling to their relatives. Many of them were scared and sad, and some small children were crying. I told myself, we all have the same situation, we are all the same. I was a mix up of hope, fear, and doubt. After a few hours in flight, I felt the hot wind burning my face when I got off the plane. I thought it was an African country, but soon I realized it was Qatar. Now I had left my beautiful country and everything behind. We were 21 days in Qatar camp. We will receive several blood reports, screening, vaccination, such as measles, polio, COVID, and many others. Then we had a 42-hour journey, including flights and bus travel. We crossed time zones and oceans. Finally, our bus stopped at the New Jersey Army camp at 12:40 a.m. Our kids were asleep, unaware of the significance of our trip. We were guided to the benches and told that we needed vaccinations. Shots were given without giving us time to make the kids stable from sleep. Being in an army camp had been filled with many challenges, from anti-vaccination to different behavior and illness. My kids developed fever and their small bodies were chilled. As I lay beside my feverish kids on both sides, I wondered if I had made the right choice. A journey that would test my endurance and patience in ways I hadn't anticipated. In the US, after a year of struggle to find a good job, I joined a non-profit as a patient educator. I noticed many challenges such as language barrier, cultural differences, stigma of mental health, and we struggled a lot to prepare people for mental health counseling sessions. We gave them the name of cultural orientation, general checkups, immigration documentation, so they ready for counseling sessions. In many cultures, especially in Afghanistan and across part of Asia, mental illness remains clouded by misunderstanding and shame. Depression may be seen as weakness, anxiety as a lack of faith. Families often hide these struggles, fearing what others might say. People suffer silently, turning spiritual healers or enduring in silence rather than seeking medical help. For immigrants and refugees, mental health challenges are even more complex. Many arrive after facing war, displacement, loss, or trauma, only to encounter new barriers, language differences, cultural gaps, financial struggles, and sometimes discriminations. Their distress may appear in physical forms, headache, fatigue, stomach pain, symptoms that mask deeper emotional wounds. Imagine being a refugee, explaining your pain to a doctor who doesn't speak your language or understand your background. Would you easily share your feelings of despair or fear? Instead of saying I'm anxious, they say my body hurts. Their sufferings hide behind physical symptoms. This is where you, the future physicians, come in. Medicine is not only about diagnosing the disease, it's about understanding the person behind it. Cultural understanding helps you see what your textbook says. Refugees leave everything behind out of fear of their lives and loved ones. And how we treat them today shapes their future in our societies. Because coming from a different culture never means being different and having different rights. Remember, every patient you meet from any culture carries a story. And as future doctors, your stethoscopes will not only listen to heartbeats, but the stories shaped by faith, migration, culture, and resilience. When you take time to understand those stories, you are not just treating illness, you are restoring hope, dignity, and humanity. Thank you so much.
We have some time to answer any questions that the audience might have for either Dr. Barra or myself.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. And I wanted to ask, in terms of people who come to you seeking resources or assistance, how are they referred and kind of where are the streams of information and support that they're able to access?
So there's an ecosystem of help out there for refugees and forced migrants. Homes Not Borders has 4 different programs. We have a home setup program, or we did when newcomers were coming here, where we get groups of volunteers, sometimes like yourselves, who come to our warehouse where we have everything ready for a family, and you all help us go to an apartment, and you can see the pictures there, and we go into an empty apartment and set up the entire place, beds, tables, and then we add extras like pictures on the walls, toys in the closets, rugs on the floors. We try to give culturally appropriate items. And so when refugees come here, they come into a home and not just an empty apartment. We also have a refugee storytelling program. We actually just had a show on Friday. Dr. Barra was trained in our storytelling program with Moth 2 years ago. We have a partnership with them. They're the largest nonprofit storytelling troupe in the nation. You can hear them on Saturdays on NPR nationwide. We have a mentoring program called Newcomers to Neighbors, where we pair Americans with cohorts in a cohort fashion with newcomers, and we have them learn about healthcare. And actually, I'm trying to talk to Dr. Joe and Dr. Barra here to coordinate something with that. Also with housing, finances, and we also have, again, in a cohort model, people go and do fun things with them. So, for instance, this Saturday, we're going to go to a soccer game as a group. And finally, we have an artisan program where, especially for women who come here from different cultures, it's really hard sometimes to get a job, especially if you have 5, 6 kids. They're expected, A, culturally to be at home, and 2, childcare is so expensive here in the United States that it's hard for both parents to find jobs, and usually it's the woman who is left behind. So we have sewing programs, and we called piecework. So for instance, we had 11 people, so dog vets, and they can do that in their homes and gain extra income. So that's the way we help at Homes Not Borders and use our resources. We also refer out very frequently if people need food. We refer out to our different partners. If they need health care, we have a list of free or low cost clinics like the Newcomers Clinic. If they need jobs, we usually refer them to the 3 refugee resettlement agencies that work in this area, which is the International Rescue Committee, IRC, ECDC, and LSS, NCA, which is Lutheran Social Services. Now, their funding has been greatly decreased because most of their funding comes from the federal government. So more and more, all of this assistance is coming from nonprofits like ours. Thank you for your question. Does anybody else have a question?
Future positions and what we should keep in mind when we are taking care of people from, I guess, other places not born here.
Sure, thank you so much. To be honest, I'm not very aware of the American medical system, but in Afghanistan, the medical school is for 7 years. They started practical from the first grade. They have rotations from first grade, and then they have special period hours for that. The cultural difference of what I noticed when I was here, especially when I was providing assistance with the medical health providers, Afghans are not very direct questions. Like, for example, if you ask any question about abuse, they will not answer. You have to find out how to ask that question, and they will not. I see many patients like when the doctor asks about any type of abuse, they never show up again. They didn't even respond to our calls. And the second thing is about the suicide. Whenever they say, I want to suicide, it doesn't mean that they are really going to do suicide, because based on the faith, it's prohibited. You have to ask follow-up questions whether really they are looking to do suicide or not. There is also about the gender issue, like whether if it's a woman, a female patient, so she would be open to the female provider more than a male. And the trust building is very important, especially in peak time. When we started our project, we had so many sessions in advance for preparing them to trust building. I will tell you another story. When I was a student, one of our teachers said that in some part of Afghanistan and also some part of Asia, they call their family relatives, they give respect. For example, for their mother-in-law, they say mother. For father-in-law, they say father. For their daughter-in-law, they say daughter. So it's just for respect. And when they say uncles, it doesn't mean it should be uncle or cousin. It could be a relatives. So my teacher said that I was doing my housework, like my practical station, and I saw a woman who was sick, and she was talking with an old woman as mother, and that old lady also was saying daughter. So when I find out that lady was all right, she had no issue, and that old woman was so valid, then I found out that lady has no problem at all. It actually was a problem of mental health. So then I asked that young woman, and that young woman trusted on me and said that actually I don't like my husband, and that's why I hate him like that, these kind of things. So when that old woman asked me about the situation, I thought she is her mother. So I told her everything. I shared that it's not a big issue, like your daughter doesn't like her husband. I think you should take care of that and this and that. So our teacher said that the next day I received that patient in very bad condition of beating, like she was tortured and beaten by her husband. and in-laws. And then I find out that, oh, I shared all with the mother-in-law, not with the mother, because of misunderstanding. So there are lots of other things like based on the culture. So understanding the culture is very important, especially regarding the mental health, because it's still a stigma, unfortunately, based on the fact they don't show up, they feel that if they say, if they talk about that, they show their weakness. Even my wife, who is very educated, she escaped from the office of mental health provider when we were here. I was convincing her and I take her to doctor, and she found the time opportunity and she escaped. She said, "No, I'm all right." And I knew that she was not all right. So this is something massive. Thank you.
And I mean, that's a very tragic story. And I guess when training in Afghanistan, being part of the culture and growing up there helps you learn a lot of these things. For those of us who are unfamiliar with cultures, and specifically Afghanistan culture, other cultures as well, how do you feel like it's the best way for us to try to learn or try to understand better, to better treat some of these families that we're going to be seeing?
Yeah, we received many training sessions, which we call core competency. They have a special trainings, like what we received. I brought some references. There was some work which is done by WHO and also some other organizations that you can read the textbooks, because every country has different culture. But around this, Afghanistan and Central Asia, they are quite similar.
If I can add in, we've had quite a bit of training from Dr. Susie Ishmael, who's a leading researcher in cultural differences between our culture and especially those in Asia and Central Asia and what I'm familiar with in Southeast Asia. And what I want to emphasize and underline with you is the difference between a collectivist culture and an individualist culture. And we in the United States, we're individualists, right? I mean, there's like this myth of rugged individualism, and you speak for yourself, you think for yourself, and the person you are considering is yourself. And your family systems grow out of that. And in other cultures, in many other cultures, actually, in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, it's collectivist. So, the clan is the most important thing. The clan, your family, your society is the most important thing. So how you speak about yourself, especially when it comes to how you're feeling inside and your symptoms, is going to come out very differently than in an American society where you can just report, I've got a fever, my head hurts, my sinuses are stuffed. And especially when you have the language differences, you might be speaking through, for a woman, someone's husband. You might be speaking through someone's child, which is deeply humiliating and embarrassing. When I was a girl, my mother had cancer. We were at MD Anderson Cancer Center. I was 13 years old, and they were putting a chemo cord in her. This medical provider was explaining a chemo cord and telling me, the 13-year-old, to translate for her. And she was going on and on and on and on, a whole paragraph about what they were about to do and the benefits and how this was going to help her. And then I said, "Oh, now, which is the only thing I knew how to say, which meant that, oh, hey, Mom, they're just going to push it into your chest." And literally, that's what I knew how to say in Vietnamese. And literally, that's all that got to my mom, because,
you are not allowed to talk in like in middle, but you are asking the provider, can we have a minute at the end? Usually at the start you could say yes, because at the start as a translator you were providing translation, so we had to translate word by word. And then we noticed that the patient is not relaxed or not feeling open to answer the questions. So then we asked the provider, can we have a minute? And then they openly said yes. Then we talked about the cultural context, like it's because of this and that, and we clear. And they were happy with us. Okay, sure. Then later on, by the passing the time, they also know what's going on. For example, in mental health, when they complain of their stomach pain or something like that, and on the follow-up patients, you find out that it's not a big problem, like they don't have it. Then you ask about their life, and they just started crying, or they become so anxious. So that's how you know that actually their problem is mental and not the physical.
And certainly with the stories that both of you have described today, it's you experience a loss when you leave behind everything that you've known, and we would be remiss in our healthcare system if we didn't use every opportunity we have to find ways to appropriately ask about the mental health of our patients who have come as refugees.
Questions from other folks? Well, thank you all.
Oh, I see one more question, sorry. Over here.
Thank you both for sharing with us these such wonderful stories. I'm an immigrant myself. I did not go through anything, anything as difficult as what you experienced by yourself, but I can empathize with the feelings of uncertainty and the fear of being in a place that I don't know where to turn to. With regards to the medical space, is there anything that either of you think that doctors have a tendency to do when they're treating someone who comes from the proper world and perhaps speaks very little, if any, English? What are the things that, in your experience, doctors do for those patients that, inadvertently may intimidate or some, things that we should avoid in order to communication?
So I'm going to give the question at the end.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Basically, what can we, as future physicians, do? What should we avoid doing when dealing with immigrant patients who are brand new to this country? So not to embarrass them or make them feel bad.
All right. Actually, the trust building is very important, I think, and the medical field, I know that it's a very honored profession and a trusted profession. Even in Afghan culture, the woman cannot trust the even very spiritual person, but they can trust some doctors. And one thing which is very common in Afghan culture is shaking hands. Like usually they don't like to shake hands with men. For example, I will tell you about my wife. When she wanted to attend some events, she applied, and the reason was she doesn't like to shake hands. But if you talk with them and start that you are listening, and you listen to them, and they feel somehow that you are a trusted person and you really want to listen to them, their problems, and once they trust you, they share everything, right? They share their problems. But the first few minutes, trust building is very important. They try to abide to everything. You have to ask follow-up questions, even if it's a symptom. They say, as I mentioned, that they will say, my body hurts, but that doesn't mean that they feel pain in their body. it means that they are anxious or they are depressed, or they will say that I have chest pain, that will have another meaning in mental health. So we have to ask follow-up questions, and then once they feel that you are trying to help, then they open to answer that question and share their information.
One thing that we learned in our training and from my lived experience is that many collectivist cultures believe in respect above all, and doctors are sort of at the top of the respect list. And it's not okay to question you guys, you know, and even if you're going through your chart and you get something wrong, no one's ever going to say, no, actually, that's not right. So I think listening deeply and asking questions, because they're never going to, like me, go back and forth with you guys and say, oh, what about this? What's going to go on? Oh, with this medicine, you know, like I already have GERD, you know, like is that going to make my stomach upset? Those are not questions you're going to get, because doctors are like God. And they've been trained in this very hierarchical culture to not question the people in the higher echelons than them. So, you know, being curious, asking questions, because, you know, especially in collective hierarchical cultures, people tend not to question you, even if you're wrong.
Sometimes they just stop taking medication after 30 days because that may not be what happens in the country that they came from. So being a little bit more explicit about what the instructions are.
Or at least in the old system in Vietnam, and I know in present systems in some parts of Europe, you can go to the pharmacist and they can give you medicine. You don't need to go to a doctor or nurse practitioner. So they don't understand why they can't just go to the pharmacy and get amoxicillin or, you know, whatever. So there's a sort of a fundamental not understanding of how the American medical system works and how you get the medicines that you need.
So can you talk a little bit more about, you had a life in Afghanistan, you had a business, and you moved over here, and so did you have to start basically from scratch again? Can you talk like just a little bit more about, I don't think you heard that much about your life in the US, and like that must have been a pretty challenging place to be, and like what did you, but in other ways it's kind of interesting because you had like this whole life and you had in here and got to like start over again, and maybe some things you could do differently because you had this new opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about like the optimistic outlook for an immigrant, not just the challenges, but then on the same I'm also ready to just hear like if you could like say pick one thing or one resource, one person who was especially helpful to you after you moved here, all that.
Of course, thank you so much. Everything has a challenge, especially if you come from another different environment, to a new place, new culture. When we arrived to the US, we already had some trauma because we worked for the democracy and women's rights for 30 years, and unfortunately everything just on a sudden fall down. Like, we lost so many soldiers, people, like how much women, widows, children, orphans. for a future democratic future. But unfortunately, everything is lost in a one day, unfortunately, because of some policy that I don't want to go that side. When we came to the US, the initial, it was very good. We were very welcomed, especially I mentioned the home borders. When we came, there was a good setting of home. We saw that in the welcome notes with a card, everything, welcome to the new home. It really gave us courage, and we were happy. My kids, I remember my kids ran to their rooms and saw lots of toys, and everything was set up. Of course, I was working in Afghanistan as a project manager for Sesame Street for 7 years, and then I worked with the US Embassy as a program manager. But when I came to the US, first as my background medical, I tried to find a job in the medical field. Whenever I went somewhere, so they asked me first an experience in the US, and I replied, so if you give me a job, so of course I will have a US experience. And then when I applied for any job, like if it was lower, like assistant positions or maybe daycare positions, and they saw my resume and they were saying, oh, you are overqualified, sorry. And so I was in the middle, like, but again, the good thing is that as people say that US is the land of opportunities, you definitely have many ways to go to experience. So I tried different. I started working as a consultant in a non-profit. Then I started working as a patient navigator because of medical field. I really enjoyed that. Still, I'm waiting for that project to resume. It's unfortunately the funds freeze on this February. Also, as I had my own business, I went to the business sector. Like I started making an LLC and working on that side. So of course, you have a broad opportunities, like ways that you start anything. First, orientation will be a little difficult. I know so many people, they have their skilled people, but they're working and they're not happy from their job. They just need some orientation or guidance to be given. Like in business, they don't know how to start a business, do registration, and unfortunately there are so many scams. So everyone, when I spoke with them, and they complain of scams, unfortunately. So that's another story. And yeah, of course, I think immigrants play a very main role, especially in the economy sector. They are already contributing more than $1 trillion in business. I know there are so many successful businessmen who are immigrants. So it means that there is opportunity, but we need to be exposed or we need to find the ways. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you both so much for being here today. Thank you to Gavin for introducing us to Amy and the program Home Without Borders. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to do a Moncton with Dr. Gavin from, he runs a newcomer clinic here at W, which provides health care for immigrants and refugees, similar to the program that you guys heard about this morning that we have at Children's National as well. So I hope you get some time to work with either of those programs. A huge thank you to Dr. Habib, Barra, and Amy for being here, showing vulnerability in a room full of 180 people that they don't know. I hope that you take a piece of their experiences with you. We do have your attendance prompt that's open now until 2:15, and while you guys are doing that, I'll let you guys close.
I can impart anything to y'all is the thought that medicine is a science, but it's also an art. The best doctors care for the whole patient and listen closely for understanding